cool is that? This is the Vivo Nex, one of the only two smartphones available in India today, including the OPPO F7 that comes with a pop-out or a slide-out camera. You know what that does? It actually eliminates the notch. Hi, I'm Ershad from t.phone, and here's my full review of the Vivo Nex. Before we jump into my full review of the Vivo Nex, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified about more such awesome tech videos. And also, we are trying to build a big community for t.phone, and we have a Facebook and WhatsApp group for that, links to which are in the description below. Now, before I start talking about the Vivo Nex and giving my full verdict on the phone, let's just take a look at what you get inside the box, because the box is also pretty cool. When you take the phone out of the box, it feels rather unassuming as such, because it's got this regular candy bar form factor. It's when you switch on the display, it's when the Vivo Nex comes to life. The massive 6.59-inch AMOLED screen with a 91.2% screen to body ratio, or 86% according to GSM Arena, just springs to life. And boy oh boy, there is no notch. Hallelujah. That raises a few questions about the design, and also raises something else from the phone. No, you filthy mind. I'm talking about the pop-out camera on the Vivo Nex. It really looks stunning when the camera pops out of the Vivo Nex, and I never got bored of looking at this whole mechanism. Now, when the Vivo Nex was launched in China, a lot of tech reviewers started raising concern about the fact that it has a motorized part and it has higher chances of it failing. Okay, allow me to break that myth for you. I know that the motor inside the Vivo Nex is not going to be entirely fail-safe, and at some point of time it might just fail. But you know what? It is more rigid than you actually think it is. Thanks to an interesting point raised by my friend Nachiket Matre, who's probably one of the most thorough reviewers in the industry, I can assure you that you don't have to worry about the sturdiness or the rigidity of the Nex's pop-out camera. Essentially, moving parts like the pop-out camera on the Nex use servo motors to move the module up and down. The servo used to build the Nex's camera is extremely sturdy, and it has a spring on the right axle to protect it from external pressure. You can feel little resistance when you actually push the motor, and it actually shuts down the camera app like you saw. Also, the module is made of glass on the front and the back with metal on the sides. The glass will protect it from scratching the lens when it moves up and down. However, there is no escaping from dust settling in the cracks. Okay, to finally answer that question if the Nexus motor will actually fail really fast, well, let me just press into rhetoric. Have you ever worried about the disk slot inside a PlayStation or even the disk slot inside your personal computer? No, you don't need to answer that. Which is precisely why I can tell you that the Nexus motor will last you at least 3 years, and by the time you're ready to buy a new phone. By the way, Vivo gives you an option to change the sounds for the module's movements. You can also choose to mute it entirely. However, even in the mute state, you will hear a faint moving sound. Apart from the pop-out camera, Vivo has also replaced the physical earpiece for calls with a vibrating display for sound. It is very similar to the piezoelectric setup on the original Mi Mix. The entire top part of the display vibrates to reproduce sound. It sounds okay. I think physical earpieces offer better sound quality. Now you also get a second generation in-display fingerprint scanner, and that's your only option for biometric scanning because Nex doesn't offer facial recognition. Thankfully, this in-display fingerprint scanner is much faster than the one inside the Vivo X21. But there are still occasions when the scanner will fail, and that's when you miss a proper physical fingerprint scanner. Also, I couldn't find the ambient light sensor on the phone because the Nex does have an auto brightness mode, which incidentally doesn't work really well. Coming back to the design, the phone itself is made of glass on the rear and the front, and it is protected by a shiny metal railing. The glass on the rear splits white light into its spectrum of colors to create this unique psychedelic effect. I find it really attractive. However, the phone itself is massive and heavy. Using it with one hand is nearly impossible. Moreover, the phone is top heavy since it is tall, and I was constantly worried that I'd drop it. Thankfully, the bundled case helps distribute some of the weight evenly across the device. Oh, and this case is by far my most favorite case bundled with the phone in 2018. You also get these extremely clicky and tactile power button and volume rocker on the right edge. There's also a dedicated button for Vivo's own AI Joby, but the Indian variant doesn't have it. So Vivo has replaced it with Google Lens, which is invoked when you short press the button. You can't remap the button unfortunately, but you can switch off the Google Lens if you want. Also, long pressing the button brings up Google Assistant. The Nex comes with a USB Type-C port at the bottom, which is flanked on either sides by the speaker grill and the dual SIM card tray. You also get a 3.5mm jack on the top, which is pretty awesome. All in all, I like what Vivo has achieved with the Nex's design, and killing the notch was definitely a masterstroke. The 6.59-inch display is an AMOLED panel sourced from Samsung, so you get deep blacks and extremely vibrant colors. Obviously, the colors are saturated and not very accurate, but there is no doubt that it looks good. Vivo doesn't provide you with the option to change the color temperature or the color gamut, so you're stuck with what you get. The display can also get adequately bright, but at certain angles you're bound to notice some discoloration, which is typical of AMOLED panels. But I still can't get over the fact that you get a massive display with no notch. Reading, watching movies, playing games, and everything else just has an added level of immersion. You just get sucked in. If you play PUBG, trust me, you can't go back to a regular notched smartphone once you play it on the Nex. Just like its predecessors, the X21 and the V9, the Vivo Nex also runs on FunTouch OS based on Android 8.1 Oreo. Now let me tell you that FunTouch actually supports Project Treble out of the box, which means that you can expect faster upgrades to the next version of Android. However, FunTouch continues to actually ape iOS, and there are a lot of design inconsistencies that I'm not really a fan of either. I have spoken in length about FunTouch OS in my full review of the Vivo V9, a link to which should be in a card somewhere here. Having said that, let me also talk a little bit more about what's changed in FunTouch OS on the Vivo Nex. Firstly, apps are scaling better now on the full screen display, but there are still a few apps that struggle with the weird 19.3:9 aspect ratio display. And then there are some other issues that crop up from time to time. For example, Google Assistant doesn't talk with Vivo's built-in timer, and it doesn't take the command for setting the timer. It's totally weird. I still love the fact that certain apps like WhatsApp throw up a floating icon on an incoming notification, and you can immediately jump into split screen mode when you click on that floating icon. Talking about the split screen mode, it is an absolute joy to use it on the Nex thanks to its big display. I found myself using the split screen mode more often. I'm probably just barely scratching the surface as far as the features on FunTouch are concerned, but the Nex actually makes for a case of using a launcher of your choice on the phone, because it's got a massive screen, you can have smaller icons, and the launcher of my choice is EV Launcher. What's the launcher of your choice? Do let us know in the comment section below. Inside the Nexus pop-out module sits an 8-megapixel sensor with an f/2.0 aperture. Let's start off by talking about the selfies. At times when the front camera manages to focus, you can get some sharp details, but during my testing I noticed that the auto HDR mode tends to overexpose selfies, and there is a lot of clipping of highlights happening in the background. Also, most of the images look like Vivo has actually switched on the beauty mode by default. I definitely don't look that fair. Anyway, there's also a separate beauty mode if you're interested in looking like a ghost. What I like about the front camera is a fairly decent software-induced portrait mode. Honestly, it's not half bad, and you will find yourself using it often. What I don't like about the portrait mode is the half-assed attempt at recreating the iPhone X's selfie lighting mode. I don't know why anyone would want a monochrome background. I'm not a fan. In fact, Huawei did a better job of aping Apple's modes on the P20 Pro. On the contrary, the 12-megapixel plus 5-megapixel camera setup on the rear offers better performance. In more ways than one, the Nexus camera tuning reminds me of what Samsung does with its flagship smartphones. Boosted color reproduction and slightly over-sharpened the details to make the image look extremely crisp. It looks great, but it is not the most accurate representation of the actual scene. Regardless, I liked what Vivo managed with the Auto HDR mode, where it boosts the dynamic range and makes the image look extremely vibrant. Essentially, you don't need to download Snapseed if you buy the Nex. In low-light situations, the Nex does fairly well, but suffers a lot from underexposing dark areas. Vivo's algorithm favors high contrast. Like the previous marquee Vivo phones launched this year, you have a software-based variable aperture mode. Essentially, to shoot good bokeh shots, you can choose an aperture of your choice. But making that choice is tough sometimes, so let me make it for you. Stick to f/4 and that's the sweet spot right there. You can get some neat depth. Look how handsome Ashish looks in this picture. As far as video recording is concerned, I'd like to tell you guys that the Nex is probably not my flagship of choice. Despite using the SD845 chip, the phone cannot shoot 1080p or 4K video in 60 FPS, and that's not cool. Thankfully, there is OIS, so you get a fairly stable footage. You can also do 240 FPS slow motion at 720p resolution and 120 FPS slow motion at 1080p. The quality is decent in good light. You can also shoot 1080p videos using the front camera, and since it has decently wide angle lens, you can accommodate more people. If you're planning to vlog using the phone, then you should know that there is very little noise cancellation on the mics itself. Overall, the Vivo's cameras fall a little short of being flagship grade, but they're not entirely unusable either. It is no surprise that Vivo has kitted the Nex with top tier specs considering it is the company's marquee product. You have your regular SD845 system on chip, 8GB of RAM and 256GB of onboard storage. There is no option to expand the storage, but I guess the amount of internal storage should actually suffice. As far as the performance is concerned, I'm not even jumping into the whole benchmark scores discussion. You can achieve one of the benchmark scores on the Nex, but what matters is the real world performance, and the Nex doesn't disappoint. That said, it is not as fast as the OnePlus 6 or the Zenfone 5Z. You're bound to come across a few hiccups once in a while, but I'm not really holding it against the Nex because it is mostly a blink and you miss it situation. Only reviewers like us care about those kind of things. And like I said, PUBG plays beautifully on the Nex. So do all the other graphically intensive games like Asphalt 8, Guns of Boom and more. Also, you must try Skyforce Reloaded on the Nex. The colorful graphics filling up the screen looks absolutely mesmerizing. I'd like to highlight that FunTouch has always had a very aggressive memory management. Thankfully, it is not as aggressive on the Nex because it has 8GB of RAM at its disposal, but it is still strict at times. I guess this is because Vivo wants to improve battery life because apps don't stay in memory for long. And now that we are on the topic of the battery, the 4000 mAh unit inside the Nex is probably the best performance I've achieved on a flagship smartphone till date. I easily got a day and a half worth of usage on a single charge and a screen on time of around 7 hours on more than a couple of occasions, which is insane. You also get Vivo's dual engine quick charge technology, which can charge the phone from 0 to 100 in 2 hours and 11 minutes. Coming to the sound quality, like I mentioned before, the piezoelectric speaker is a letdown. And the mic is also not very effective because on more than one occasion, the caller on the other hand couldn't hear me clearly. As for the mono speaker, it gets adequately loud, but it is not a very rich sound. And it is easy to muffle the sound when you hold the phone in landscape mode. Vivo also bundles a pair of earphones in the box, but the sound quality is meh. Swap it for a pair of reference earphones like my One More Triple Drivers and the sound does improve drastically. So coming to the final part of the review, should you actually buy the Vivo Nex or not? If you don't care for flagship grade camera performance or its massive size, the Vivo Nex is a stunning display of innovation and it's definitely not a bad buy, especially considering that the brand got the price right this time around. Obviously, phones like the OnePlus 6 and the Asus Zenfone 5Z are better value propositions overall and might just offer better cameras as well. But the Vivo Nex with its pop-out camera is absolutely innovative and it's definitely going to turn heads when you take it around. However, if Vivo is watching this video, I really want its engineers to take our feedback seriously when we say that FunTouch OS needs a lot of work. And if you hate the notch as much as I do, then you don't have many options anyway. It is either between the Nex or the Find X. And all the negative chatter around motorized parts aside, I think that pop-out cameras look damn cool. All said and done, at Mr. Phone, we're glad that hashtag say no to the notch is finally gaining traction. So that was a full review of the Vivo Nex. Do let us know in the comment section below what you thought about this futuristic flagship phone. Until next time, this is Ershad signing off. Tata.